Revenge for a loved one. The story of a bartender who restored justice. I was not surprised when I got a job as a bartender at a very expensive establishment, which, for simplicity and anonymity, I will call the Thigh End, because I am a good-looking woman with many feminine physical assets. I wasn't an expert mixologist, but I was good enough to make ends meet, especially since male customers like to man up and explain things to me when I had questions about this or that exotic drink. But I didn't come to Thigh End to make a lot of money. I could have made more doing other things, nor to expand my knowledge of mixology. Rather, I made a vow to my husband, who didn't like the last place I worked, and I didn't want to break it. I had been working at Thigh End for about a week when I first saw Jason Williams. He was a well-known figure in our town, you might even say a minor celebrity, though not with the best reputation. He was large and rough, wearing an expensive suit, shoes, and tie that alone must have cost $200. It seemed that all the women in the audience had their eyes on him at one time or another. I expected him to be difficult, perhaps even unpleasant or rude, when he broke away from his female companions and approached the bar. I lingered for a couple seconds before approaching him. Instead of the scowl I suspected, he had a smile on his face. "Hi, I'm Jason Williams," he said, extending his hand. "You must be new. I haven't seen you before." I shook his hand, hoping it was a cold, fishy handshake. I hate getting one and hoped he did too, but it didn't seem to faze him. "I'm Virginia Masters," I said, using my maiden name as my last name rather than my married name, Payne. "Nice to meet you, Virginia. Have you been bartending for long?" "Not very. I recently changed careers, Mr. Williams." "Please call me Jason. What were you before? A mannequin?" At this, I gave a fake smile. I had actually been a bikini model from age 18 to 23, but from age 24 until now, 29, I had been in real estate. I didn't think my real estate firm was bad and well-paying, but my husband Bryce hated it. He really disliked that I was often harassed by creeps, including the owners of the company. I could handle them, but Bryce didn't like that I had to deal with their brazen behavior. It was in honor of Bryce that I went to work at Thigh End. After Jason chatted with me for a bit, I declined further conversation. I didn't want to hang out with him, at least not yet, and asked, "What can I get you, Jason?" "I'd like a Sazerac," he grinned. I'd never heard that word before. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jason, but I've never heard of that drink. Have you tried it here in the past?" "Probably not," he laughed. "The last few bartenders here weren't all that experienced, and certainly not as pretty as you. But Munger, Harold Munger is the owner of the Thigh End, told me he'd get the ingredients." "Then I'll find the recipe in my phone, prepare it for you, and bring it to your table," I smiled. "Although it might take a while because 2 waitresses just placed an order," I continued, nodding in the direction where, ta-da, 2 waitresses had just placed an order at the other end of the bar. "No problem," he smiled. "Whenever you come up, Virginia," and walked back to the table he was sitting at with 3 male friends. I wondered why he had walked over to the bar rather than ordering a drink through the waitress as his companions had apparently done. I quickly followed the standard waitress orders and then searched my iPhone for the word Sazerac. I found it under men's drinks and noted that it was made with brandy, absinthe, Peychaud's bitters, and sugar, and was prepared in an unusual way. Apparently, Williams was telling the truth about Munger's ordering the ingredients for the Sazerac, because when I looked in the specialty ingredients drawer, I found Peychaud's bitters, something I'd never even heard of before. It took a while to prepare the Sazerac, but luckily the other bartender, Raymond, had returned from his break to fulfill the waitress's order, and I was able to deliver Williams his drink. As I approached Williams' table, the young guy sitting to his right looked at me intently. When I placed the drink on the table in front of Williams, he smiled and said, "Thanks, Virginia. It looks good and in exactly the same glass." "My pleasure, Jason," I smiled. "Great girl," the young man said, looking at me. Jason rubbed the back of his head and growled, "Watch your language and be respectful, Jerry." Now apologize to Virginia. A satisfied Jerry muttered, "Sorry, Virginia." I just kept the same smile I'd come to the table with, didn't even acknowledge the apology, and crept back to the bar. In doing so, I probably moved my body. Well, because I have a really good body. Despite the fact that Thigh End is a high-class establishment, I expected comments like the one Jerry made, especially after Munger made me wear a uniform that was probably closer to what a Las Vegas showgirl would wear than a typical bartender in a decent Midwestern U.S. city. He also insisted that I not wear my wedding and engagement ring. What surprised me wasn't the nice body remark, but the fact that Jason quite reasonably penalized his date for it. It was very surprising given what I knew about Jason. After a few weeks at Thigh End, I had learned a lot about bartending. My co-workers were pleasant, and most of the customers at least weren't rude. Although comments like Jerry's were directed at me at least a couple times a night. It wasn't even as bad as when I worked as a bikini model or at the real estate firm my husband Bryce hated, so I didn't have any problems in the workplace. Jason Williams had always been a regular at the hip end, and after I started working there, he started coming even more often. Every time he came in, he would seek me out to talk to me. He'd even invite me to his table when I was on break, which Munger not only disapproved of, but encouraged. Whenever Jason and I interacted, he never said a rude word to me or peeped at me like so many of our male customers did. He was also noted for his quick wit. Although I didn't put on an act, I didn't enjoy socializing with Jason Williams as much as most other women did. He was handsome, smart, rich, and charming. But I'd made a vow to Bryce and I wanted to keep it. So when I had strange, loving thoughts about Jason, I didn't like it. I remembered the lyrics to the song Wicked Game, one of my favorites, which seemed appropriate for this situation. It's strange what desire makes stupid people do. I never dreamed I'd meet someone like you. No, I don't want to fall in love with you. I began to doubt that Jason's reputation wasn't true, that he was really as charming as he seemed. However, I tried to push those thoughts away. After all, I had made a vow to Bryce, and I am a man of my word. After Jason showed up at Thigh End about 3 months ago, and I was regularly amazed at how charming he was, the next logical thing happened. He asked me to dinner. I was expecting it and by then had mixed feelings about it, but decided to go nonetheless. I was off work on Sunday night when Jason picked me up at Thigh End, where I was working that day. I had changed out of my bar uniform into a stylish but still revealing long blue dress with a side slit almost down to my panties. Jason was charming at dinner, but afterward, when he invited me back to his penthouse, he was more demanding than charming. Still, I went with him. And though in the elevator on the way up, I remembered the vow I'd made to my husband Bryce, I had my doubts. Clutching my purse in my hands, however, I calmed down. When we entered his penthouse, Jason's face changed. He became very affectionate very quickly. It wasn't long before he had already removed my dress and was rubbing his hands over my body. I discovered that he was even stronger than he looked, especially when he took off his shirt and exposed his body. At that moment, I realized that it was useless and unproductive to resist, so I let him do what he wanted with me. When he carried me to the bed, however, I remembered to bring my purse, even though my clothes were in a big pile in his living room. Jason seemed to really like my body, despite my vow to Bryce, since I was essentially helpless at this point. I saw no reason not to physically enjoy the situation, even if Jason had shown himself to be a real brute. Next, we had sex, and it felt good. "Say, Jason," I said in a sing-song voice, "do you remember Lisa and Bryce Payne?" When Jason opened his eyes, he had a very confused expression on his face, and even though he was still high on the endorphins from my sex, he muttered, "You mean that crazy Duru who accused me of using and then killed herself, and her nerdy brother?" "Yeah, that's them," I snickered, quickly jabbing the hypodermic needle into his body and spitting out its contents. Of course, he involuntarily flinched when I did that, yes, so much so that even though it ate, threw me off the bed. Fortunately, the carpet in his bedroom was thick and soft, so I didn't hurt myself landing on it. Jason cried out in pain and finally pulled the needle out of his body, though not too carefully, so there was blood everywhere. As he squirmed in pain, his eyes met mine and he saw hatred in them. Then the chemicals from the needle kicked in, and before he could reach me, probably hoping to strangle me to death, he collapsed, still thrashing in agony. I enjoyed the way his death throes indicated the excruciating pain he was in. The chemicals from the syringe, as stated, ensured that his death was as agonizing as possible. When he stopped moving, I waited a few more minutes, then measured his pulse to make sure he was dead. Then I took the syringe, put it in a plastic bag in my purse, got dressed, and walked down the stairs to the back entrance of his luxury high-rise. I knew that good forensic scientists would eventually be able to find my DNA, and maybe even fingerprints, at the crime scene, but neither my DNA nor fingerprints were in any database, and I was already making plans to move to Australia with the insurance money from Bryce's death. The next day, I went to the cemetery and knelt at Bryce's headstone, which was next to Lisa's. After placing flowers on his grave, with tears in my eyes, I said, "I got him, Bryce. I fulfilled my vow to you. The guy who caused your little sister Lisa to kill herself and you to be killed when you complained to the authorities is dead. And it was an excruciatingly painful death, just like I promised. I won't come back to you for a while. I want things to calm down before I return. But you will be in my heart every day." Having cried enough, I stood up, double-checked my travel bag for a fake passport in the name of Rachel Watts and a ticket to Australia in the same name, and walked to the cab, waiting for me on the inner cemetery road near Bryce's headstone. I was starting a new life, fulfilling the promises I'd made to the love of my life to avenge the use and suicide of his sister and my own death. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.